So we've seen so far the three shitot of where is this mitzvah of zachor, where is mitzvah of Havdala come from? Does it start from the flip side of Kiddush? You have to make Kiddush, you have to make Havdala at the one side, you have to make Havdala at the other side. That's the Rambam and the Mefarish. I don't know why I keep on forgetting the name of the Machriya. I don't know. I keep on saying about to say other names. The Machriya is one. The Smag who says Zachor v'Zacharta, and Rabbi Yochanan. No, the Magid Mishnah and the Ritva, who Yaakov insists is only an asmachta, they don't mean it seriously, right? Is another midrash. Is Doraita or Drabanan? The Ritva says Doraita. The Meir says Drabanan. Again, we could ask ourselves: does the Rambam means Doraita? Does the Rambam means Drabanan? I want to now bring to the Rambam. Right, the Rambam thing is Doraita. The Smag thing is Doraita. You can argue those. I'll leave you guys to think about it. So your thoughts are probably as good as mine. Now let's go into a couple of nafkaminot. So there's one halacha that you have to mention Yetziat Mitzrayim in Kiddush. So what's interesting about this part of the sugya, I want to start from Minchas Chinuch and then point out what's interesting about what's going on here. Minchas Chinuch says, wait, in that case, L'chora, you should also mention Yetziat Mitzrayim and Havdala, right? L'chora, כיוון דאלפין מגזרה שווה, לצורך הזכרת יציאת מצרים, אם כן, גם לסוברים, גם הבדלה דאורייתא, דהווה בכלל זכירה, למה לא תקנו להזכיר יציאת מצרים? Now, what's interesting is, okay, if you say, so like this, if you say that the mitzvah is Ula Havdil ben Ekol Shuven Achol, so this has nothing to do with Yetziat Mitzrayim, right? It's nothing to do with Yetziat Mitzrayim, right? L'chora, the question, it's not only that, right? Because not only that, it doesn't really have anything to do with Shabbos either, right? We said Havdil ben Ekol Shuven Achol is more of a general mitzvah, assuming it's the right Yaakov, yes. Havdil ben Ekol Shuven Achol is a general mitzvah of differentiating between Kodesh and Chol. Now, that's relevant when we shecht, and it's relevant when we keep meat and milk, meat and milk sinks, and it's relevant in many different rents. Relevant when we keep Hilchot Nida, right, etc. Or Bichlal Tumav Tahara, which we don't really do so much except for that one. But right, it's a broad mitzvah that spans across many mitzvot and many issues, right? The Rambam's book Sefer Kedusha focuses l'chora on those things, right? Machalot Asurot, etc. Now, Yisrael Biyah, right? All those things. Now, L'Havdil ben Ekol Shuven Achol is a general mitzvah to differentiate between those, and therefore it's not Shabbos. It's not specifically Shabbos dik. Now, on the other side, moving on to the next one, the Smag talks about v'zacharta, but it's not the midrash Rav Acha bar Yaakov brings. Rav Acha bar Yaakov says there's a hekesh between Leman tizkor et yom tzatcha me'eretz Mitzrayim kol yemei chayecha and the pasuk zachor et yom Shabbat lekadsho. But the Smag is talking about v'zacharta, which is a different pasuk. So maybe there's no reason to mention Yetziat Mitzrayim during Havdala if the source isn't Zachor Yom Shabbat Lekadsho. So the question should only be hard on the Rambam, right? So Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says it's not on the Rambam. It's not a problem either. Why not? He says like this. There's a good word. He says the Rambam says that Kiddush and Havdala are the right two sides of the same coin, right? As I said before, I said kind of tongue in cheek, but also kind of seriously. If you don't do Havdala, you're not really Yotze Kiddush next week, right? According to the Rambam, right? Because if you don't elevate yourself into Shabbos and then ascend from the Kiddush of Shabbos at the end, you didn't really do it. You didn't really make Kiddush properly, right? That's how I explained the Rambam earlier. So if they're two sides of the same coin, you don't need to mention Yetziat Mitzrayim in both. It's enough to mention in one, right? It's enough that you mention when you enter Shabbat, right? You don't need to mention it again as you leave Shabbat because it's the flip side of the same coin. I'll just read the Garshaz over here, Shlomo Zalman. Nirelo de kevan sheim nomar Havdala id mideoraita, הרי זה נלמד מקרא דזכור את יום שבת לקדשו. כיוון שכן נראה, שגם הרמב"ם מתכוון, decided במה שהזכירים פעם אחת בקידוש של תחילת שבת. It's all one big mitzvah of making Kiddush and Havdala. So you don't have to mention Yetziat Mitzrayim twice. You mentioned it once. That's enough. That's Rosh Shlomo Zalman. Now, I just want to point out, he said, according to the Smag, this isn't a question, right? Why not? Because the Smag learns it from the Zacharta, right? There's nothing to do with Zachar. The Rambam learns it from Zachor. So there's a hekesh between Zachor Yashal Lekadsho and Leman Tizkot Yom Tzitcha Meretz Mitzrayim Kol Yemei Chayecha. The Smag learns from Zacharta. That's not part of the hekesh. But let's read the Smag's pasuk. Bezacharta ki evedeit abilut Mitzrayim. V'yotzecha Hashem Elokecha misham. Be'ad chazaka v'zoan netuyah. That would be the best place to mention Yetziat Mitzrayim. No, it should be far more important to mention Yetziat Mitzrayim at Havdala than at Kiddush, because Kiddush is a Chod and Shabbat Kadsho. Tov, you have a hekesh. There's a different pasuk that also mentions Yetziat Mitzrayim with a similar word. But here, not only is it a similar word, v'zacharta and leman tizkor and zachot and Shabbat, right? It's also the pasuk itself, in the context of Shabbos, is talking about zacharta ki evedei devaras Mitzrayim. Right, this should be the most important place to mention Yetziat Mitzrayim. But maybe, so I don't really have a good answer. I'm going to suggest something, and Yaakov is going to say that it's not a good answer. So that's the deal. I'm going to suggest something. I just playing around with how do we answer this? So here's a thought. I wouldn't go so far as to call it an answer yet, but it's a thought that's, I think, worth considering. The way I presented the smag before, Zachor was when you enter Shabbat. As you enter Shabbat, you say, Hashem once took us out of Mitzrayim, as we're reading in this week's Parshiot, right? Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim once. I need to remember that as I enter Shabbat. I'm receiving menucha that I otherwise would not receive. Then you go through Shabbat, focused on Shamol. That's what happens during the Shabbat, right? You have to keep Shabbat. You have to make sure you're not breaking Shabbat. Zachor is that moment where you're entering Shabbat, you're not breaking Shabbat, you're davening or you're making Kiddush. Not really time to break Shabbat. But then as you go into Shabbat, the possibility of not being aware enough of Shabbat's Kedusha is possible. And that's why you go into Shamol. As you leave Shabbat, you call everyone around your table and you say, guys, now we're leaving Shabbat and we're going to do V'zacharta, and that's a mitzvah not on my slaves who are sitting over here and are going to get back to work. It's a mitzvah on me to remember them, right? In other words, the midrash that connects the zchira of Yetziat Mitzrayim connects it to the memory of Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim, so we're all going to rest now. The zacharta is a mitzvah of once a week we tell everyone to stop so that you remember the way to treat your workers during the week as well. That's not really a relevant time to mention Yetziat Mitzrayim, because the point isn't to remember Yetziat Mitzrayim. The point is to remember that you were a slave. It might depend on what you put the emphasis on. Is it v'zacharta ki evedei be'eretz Mitzrayim? Right. I want to read the pasuk in two ways. Right. We're going to cut the psukim here in two different ways. I'm going to start from here. I'm going to read one pasuk. One reading will go as follows: Leman yenuach avdecha v'amatcha kamocha v'zacharta ki evedei be'eretz Mitzrayim. But is another thing. Or you read it, v'zacharta ki evedei be'eretz Mitzrayim v'yotzecha Hashem Elokecha. Or v'zacharta part of and then as you leave Shabbat, also remember ki evedei be'eretz Mitzrayim. You carry that with you as you go into the week. Is that the midrash? Or happened during Shabbat. As you leave Shabbat, and the emphasis is on V'yetzecha Hashem Elokecha. I think it's all what I said. Only works if the emphasis is on ki zacharta ki evedei be'eretz Mitzrayim. So remember that you too was a slave. You too were a slave. You were a slave as well. You should appreciate how you treat your people, your workers, as you leave Shabbat. So that's a possible nafkamina. Just to sum that up, it's possible nafkamina that the Minchot Chinuch and the Shlomo Zalman discuss the question of if Havdala really has to do with Kiddush and with Schira. You should also mention Yetziat Mitzrayim. Possibly it's enough that you mention it in Kiddush, and that would suffice. As I said, according to the Rabbi Yochanan's drasha, right, to Havdala Kodesh v'Nachol is nothing that's Shabbos. It's not inherently connected to Shabbos, and that's why it makes sense that you wouldn't have to mention Yetziat Mitzrayim either.